The text message arrived on a Wednesday afternoon while I was reviewing blueprints for a major commercial project at my architecture firm. Hey everyone, we finally finished our wedding guest list. We're keeping it very exclusive, only 80 guests. We've decided to invite family members who have built successful careers and accomplished something meaningful with their lives. We want our wedding to reflect hard work, success, and achievement. Can't wait to celebrate with our accomplished family. Within seconds, the family group chat exploded with praise. My aunt called it a wonderful idea, my uncle said standards mattered, and my cousin agreed that keeping things exclusive made perfect sense. Even my mother proudly praised my younger cousin Madison for wanting her wedding to represent the family's success. I sat quietly staring at my screen as dozens of relatives reacted with hearts, thumbs up, and congratulatory messages. Then a private message from Madison appeared. Hey Zoe, just wanted to let you know we're keeping the wedding really small. We're inviting family members with established careers only. I'm sure you understand. Maybe we can grab coffee after the honeymoon. I looked at the message for a moment before setting my phone aside. A few minutes later, my assistant entered my office. The contractor needs approval for the eco-friendly materials upgrade. It'll increase costs by $340,000. Approve it, I replied without hesitation. The sustainability certification is worth more than the extra expense. After she left, I glanced back at the family chat. Everyone was now discussing Madison's luxury wedding venue in California wine country and her fiancé's respectable job as a financial analyst. I simply typed, "Congratulations, Madison. Wishing you both the best," then muted the conversation and returned to work. Their assumption that I had failed in life wasn't new. For 8 years, my family had believed I was the disappointment of the family ever since I dropped out of law school after my first semester. At 22, I had followed the path everyone expected. Political science degree, law school admission, and eventually a career at a prestigious law firm, just like my father, my uncle, and my cousin Brett. The problem was that I hated every moment of it. I hated the competition, the endless arguments, and the future that felt like it belonged to someone else. One day, I finally admitted the truth to myself, withdrew from school, packed my belongings, moved across the country to Seattle, and accepted an entry-level position at a small architecture firm. My family treated it like a disaster. My father told me I was ruining my future. My uncle said architecture would never bring real money or respect. Others called me unrealistic and irresponsible. From that moment on, the family quietly labeled me as the relative who had thrown away every opportunity she'd been given. I still remembered a Thanksgiving years earlier when Aunt Sharon had openly called me a failure for chasing creative dreams instead of building a real career. Madison, who was still a teenager back then, had looked at me with sympathy and said she would never walk away from something important just because it was difficult. No matter how many times I explained that I wasn't quitting, only choosing a different future, nobody listened. The family had already decided who I was. I became the example they used whenever younger relatives talked about unusual career choices. Eventually, I stopped defending myself. I moved to Seattle and focused entirely on my work. I started by designing houses, then small office buildings, and gradually moved on to larger and more complex projects. Over the years, I worked my way through several firms before launching my own company. Today, Chen Architecture and Design employed more than 60 people and had earned recognition for several award-winning public and sustainable development projects. The company generated millions of dollars every year, but my family knew none of it. Whenever I visited, I wore simple clothes, drove an ordinary car, and avoided discussing business. They assumed I was still struggling, still trying to make architecture work, and I never corrected them. At some point, their opinions simply stopped mattering. That was why being excluded from Madison's wedding barely affected me. If anything, I was curious how long they could continue believing a story that was completely wrong. While the family obsessed over wedding plans, my own week was filled with meetings, client presentations, and major contracts. On Sunday afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. The woman introduced herself as Amanda Whitmore from a well-known architecture magazine. She wanted to feature me in an upcoming issue highlighting influential architects and requested an interview about my sustainable design projects. We scheduled a meeting for the following week, and after hanging up, I stepped onto my apartment balcony and looked across the city skyline. Several of the buildings visible from where I stood existed because of my designs, yet my family had no idea. A few minutes later, a text arrived from my project manager. A massive waterfront development contract worth $31 million had just been finalized. The team wanted to celebrate the next day. I smiled and agreed immediately. At that exact moment, another notification appeared from the family group chat. Madison was posting yet another wedding update while everyone showered her with excitement, completely unaware of what was happening in my life. The next morning, I was leading an important design meeting when my phone began vibrating nonstop. I ignored it and focused on the structural plans in front of me. By the time the meeting ended an hour and a half later, I had dozens of missed calls and messages from family members. Curious, I opened the family group chat and immediately saw what had happened. Someone had discovered an online magazine article featuring me as one of the country's rising architects. Another relative had shared a profile of a university science center my firm had designed, followed by a link to my company website. There was no denying it anymore. My photo, title, and biography were all there for everyone to see. The chat had turned into complete chaos. Family members were asking when I had started my company, how I had become so successful, and why nobody knew about it. Madison was especially shocked, insisting there had to be some mistake because she believed I was still working as a designer for someone else. After reading through the endless messages, I finally replied. The information is correct. I founded my firm 5 years ago, and we currently employ more than 60 people. Within seconds, my phone exploded again. Madison suddenly wanted me at the wedding. My parents demanded explanations. My aunt complained that she had spent years telling people I was struggling. Everyone seemed upset that they had been wrong. I ignored the messages and spent the afternoon celebrating a major business contract with my team. By evening, the missed calls had become impossible to ignore, so I finally answered when my mother called again. She immediately accused me of hiding the truth. Calmly, I reminded her that I had told the family many times about my work over the years, but nobody had listened. Whenever I mentioned my projects or my company, the conversation was quickly redirected toward someone else's achievements. They had already decided I was a failure and never bothered to hear anything different. My mother argued that I should have corrected them more strongly, but I explained that after years of being dismissed and judged, I stopped trying to prove myself. I focused on building my career instead. She then told me that Madison felt terrible and wanted to send me a wedding invitation immediately. I wasn't surprised. The moment they learned I was successful, everything had changed. My mother hesitated before asking the question everyone wanted answered. "Will you come to the wedding?" I looked at my calendar, thinking carefully before giving her an answer. I checked my schedule and immediately saw the problem. Madison's wedding was set for the exact same day as the groundbreaking ceremony for a museum renovation project my firm had spent 2 years developing. It was one of the biggest contracts in our company's history, and there was no chance I would miss it. When my mother insisted that family should come first, I calmly reminded her that family hadn't come first when the wedding invitations were being handed out. Madison had specifically chosen to invite only relatives she considered successful, and at the time, nobody thought I belonged on that list. Now that they knew the truth, they expected me to change my plans. I politely refused and wished Madison the best before ending the call. A few days later, my interview with Pacific Design magazine went exactly as planned. The journalist was impressed by my career journey and especially interested in how I had built a successful architecture firm after leaving law school. When she described me as a law school dropout, I smiled and corrected her. I didn't drop out. I chose a different direction. She loved the answer and planned to feature it in the article. While my professional life continued moving forward, my family remained obsessed with the discovery. The group chat was full of arguments, confusion, and apologies. Madison posted a long message claiming she had misunderstood my situation and insisting that I was welcome at the wedding. I never responded. Then, on Wednesday afternoon, my father unexpectedly arrived at my office. My assistant escorted him inside, and I watched him slowly take in the executive office, the city views, the architectural models, and the awards displayed throughout the room. For the first time, he was seeing the life I had built for myself. After sitting down, he quietly admitted he had come to apologize. I told him I was listening. For several moments, he struggled to find the words before finally admitting that he had been wrong all these years. He confessed that he wanted me to become a lawyer because that was the only path he truly understood. When I chose architecture instead, he saw it as a rejection of everything he valued. Rather than accepting my decision, he convinced himself that I had failed and spent years believing I was struggling because it made him feel justified. Looking down at his hands, he admitted that none of it had made him happy. The realization in his voice was genuine, and for the first time in years, I could see the regret he had been carrying. My father's voice broke as he admitted that his pride and stubbornness had cost him 8 years of my life. He had missed every achievement, every milestone, and even supported Madison's decision to exclude me because he believed I hadn't accomplished anything meaningful. After a long silence, he told me he had researched my projects and discovered that the civic center I designed had won major awards and was being studied by architecture students. He confessed that my company had become more successful than he ever imagined, and that I had achieved everything he once wanted for me, just through a different profession. Then he looked me in the eyes and asked if I could forgive him. I told him honestly that forgiveness would take time. One apology could not erase years of disappointment and judgment. If he wanted to repair our relationship, he needed to understand my work and respect it for what it was, not because it happened to be successful. I also told him that our family's habit of measuring people by career status and achievements had created this entire situation. Madison had simply followed values she had learned from the adults around her. My father quietly agreed. Before leaving, he asked one last time if I would attend the wedding. I explained that I already had an important groundbreaking ceremony for a museum project that had been planned for months. I wasn't going to cancel a professional commitment simply because my family had suddenly changed their opinion of me. At the door, my father paused and finally said the words I had waited years to hear. He told me he was proud of me and admitted he should have said it long ago. After he left, I sat alone in my office, looking out across the city skyline and thinking about everything that had happened. When Saturday arrived, I spent the day at the museum groundbreaking ceremony instead of the wedding. Surrounded by city leaders, museum executives, clients, and my team, I watched the project officially begin. During my speech, I talked about the importance of creating buildings that serve future generations and leave a lasting impact on communities. The audience responded with warm applause, and together we broke ground on a project that would stand for decades. Throughout the ceremony, my phone continued vibrating with family messages, but I ignored them. Later that evening, everyone involved in the project gathered at a downtown restaurant to celebrate. Sitting among people who respected my work and believed in my vision, I felt something far more valuable than approval. I felt exactly where I was meant to be. That evening, my team gathered to celebrate the museum project. We shared stories about the challenges we had overcome and the exciting work ahead. At one point, my project manager raised his glass and joked that leaving law school had been the smartest decision I had ever made. Everyone laughed because they knew the real story. They knew I had chosen architecture intentionally and built my success through years of hard work. Later that night, I finally checked my phone. The family group chat had been quiet for hours. The last message came from Madison. Instead of posting wedding photos, she had shared a screenshot from the museum's live stream. It showed me standing at the podium in a hard hat, speaking about the future of the project. Beneath the image was a message from my father. "This is what success looks like. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand." 2 weeks later, a major architecture magazine published its feature on my career. The article covered my journey from leaving law school to building one of the most respected architecture firms in the region. The headline focused on a quote that perfectly summarized my life. I hadn't quit. I had simply chosen a path that mattered more than other people's expectations. The article quickly spread through my family and community. Within hours, my mother called. She admitted that people were asking why the family had never spoken about my accomplishments. I told her the truth was simple. The family had never paid attention because they had already decided my career choice was a mistake. She pointed out that the article never mentioned family support. I explained that was intentional. My success came from my own decisions, the mentors who guided me, and the team who believed in me. The people who spent years dismissing my dream couldn't suddenly claim credit for it now. Later, Madison called as well. This time, her apology sounded sincere. She admitted she had judged me based on appearances and assumptions. She had been taught to measure success through job titles, degrees, and traditional careers, so she never bothered to learn what I was actually doing. She acknowledged that excluding me from her wedding had been wrong and that her announcement in the family chat had been hurtful. I listened quietly before telling her the truth. Her decision had been cruel, but it had also revealed exactly how our family viewed people. For the first time, she understood that the problem wasn't just the wedding. It was the belief that a person's value depended on their status, income, or career. And that realization was far more important than any apology. Madison later admitted that her wedding day had been overshadowed by conversations about my museum project and the success of my architecture firm. She told me it was the consequence of her own actions. By creating a guest list based on status and achievement, she had ended up excluding the very person she had underestimated the most. For the first time, she genuinely apologized and asked if we could start over as family. I agreed. Then she surprised me by asking my firm to design the new home she and her husband, David, planned to build. She explained that it had nothing to do with guilt. She simply admired my work and wanted to understand the person she had spent years judging without knowing. A few months later, I was standing with Madison and David on their construction site, reviewing plans for their future home. They listened carefully as I explained how the layout would capture natural light, maximize views, and create comfortable living spaces. Watching them engage with my work felt different from any conversation we had ever shared before. For the first time, they were interested in who I really was instead of who they assumed I was. As the project moved forward, the rest of the family slowly changed as well. My father began following my projects, discussing architecture with genuine interest, and openly expressing pride in my accomplishments. My mother stopped comparing careers and started asking meaningful questions about my work. The family wasn't perfect, but they were finally learning that success could take many forms. One afternoon, after finishing a design meeting, I checked the family group chat and found a photo my father had posted from a professional conference. A presentation about civic architecture was being shown on a large screen, and one of my award-winning buildings was featured prominently. Beneath the photo, he had written a simple message: "Proud father moment. Nobody here knows she's my daughter, but I do." I stared at the screen for a few seconds and smiled. It wasn't the recognition, the awards, or the money that mattered most. It was the fact that after years of assumptions, disappointment, and misunderstanding, my family was finally beginning to see me for who I truly was. And that felt more meaningful than any title or achievement ever could.